me, Itana, 27 years old, living with my boyfriend Jackson. We've been together for about 3 years, living in the same apartment for 2. It's a decent place. Not huge, but it's in a good part of the city. I handle the aesthetics, the vibe. He handles the boring stuff. That was kind of our unspoken arrangement from the start. I make the place look good, feel like a home. He makes sure the place doesn't fall apart. Seemed like a fair trade to me. My friends all think he's a bit of a fixer-upper himself. Not in the looks department, he's fine, I guess. But his personality, he's just quiet. He works in some kind of trade, I'm not even totally sure what. Something with his hands. Comes home tired, covered in dust sometimes. My friends are all in marketing, social media management, things like that. We talk, we network. Jackson just exists. He's steady, like a rock, or a piece of furniture. It used to be comforting, but lately it just felt like he was weighing the room down. My world is about ideas, about challenging structures. His world seemed to be about whether the water pressure in the shower was adequate. Our life was a series of small, invisible tasks that he just did. I'd mentioned the Wi-Fi was acting up again while I was trying to join a video call with my book club. I'd be in the middle of explaining how the author deconstructs patriarchal power dynamics, and my screen would freeze. Super embarrassing. I'd complain about it later, telling him our internet was basically useless. It was like a personal attack on my social life. He wouldn't say much, just a nod. Then, later that evening, I'd see him by the router. He'd have the little box in his hands, unplugging things, plugging them back in. Sometimes he'd be on the phone with the provider, using a bunch of technical jargon I didn't understand. He'd spend an hour doing that. I would just watch him from the couch, scrolling through my phone. It was annoying, honestly. It felt like such a stereotypically male thing to do, fiddling with wires, like he couldn't just call someone to fix it properly. He had to do it himself. A little power trip, probably. Asserting his domain over the technology in the house. Classic toxic masculinity. One time I said that to him. You know, this whole man must fix wires thing is a bit performative, don't you think? He just looked up from the router, blinked a couple of times. Then he said, "The green light is supposed to be solid, not blinking. I'm just trying to make it solid." He completely missed the point. An hour later, the internet would be blazing fast. I'd go back to my video calls without a problem. I never really said, "Thank you." Why would I? A functioning utility is the bare minimum for a shared living space. It wasn't a gift, it was an expectation. The same thing happened with everything else. The garbage can would be overflowing. I have a sensitive nose, so the smell would really start to bother me. I'd make a comment about it. Wow, someone really needs to take out the trash. I was testing him, seeing if he would pick up on the social cue. Sometimes it would take a day. He'd walk past it a few times. I'd get more and more annoyed. It's not my job. I do the emotional labor in this relationship. I manage our social calendar. I remember birthdays. Taking out a bag of garbage is a simple physical task. Finally, I'd see him tying up the bag and taking it out. No fanfare, no complaining. He'd just do it. And a small part of me would feel this weird mix of relief and resentment. Relieved that the task was done, but resentful that I even had to notice it in the first place. He should have just known. Weaponized incompetence, my friends called it. Pretending you don't see the mess until the woman has to point it out. It felt exactly like that. Finances were another sore spot. He made more money than me, significantly more. When we first moved in together, we had a conversation about splitting the bills. He suggested a 70-30 split on the rent, since that was proportional to our incomes. He also offered to cover all the utilities: water, electricity, internet. At the time, I thought it was a pretty good deal. But as I got more educated on systemic issues, my perspective shifted. It wasn't a generous offer. It was a corrective measure, a small-scale wealth redistribution to account for the historical and ongoing gender pay gap. He was just doing what was fair on a societal level, so I never felt like I owed him anything for it. In fact, sometimes I felt like he should be doing more. He'd talk about saving for a house one day. I'd just laugh. The idea of tying myself to a mortgage with someone so traditional, it was suffocating. I'd tell him my money was for experiences, for travel, for me. He'd just nod and go back to his spreadsheet, tracking every penny. My car was another thing. It was an older model, a hand-me-down from my parents. Things were always going wrong with it. A weird rattling sound. A light on the dashboard I didn't recognize. I'd mention it to him over dinner. My car is making that noise again. It's so annoying. I'm probably going to have to spend a fortune at the mechanic. I was venting. I wanted sympathy. The next morning, I'd wake up and my car keys would be gone from the hook by the door. I'd start to panic a little, thinking they were lost. Then, I'd see a note on the counter. Took your car to get the oil changed and check that noise. Be back soon. Jay. He'd come back a few hours later and the car would be fine. The noise would be gone. The mystery light on the dashboard would be off. He'd tell me it was just a loose belt or something. It's all taken care of, he'd say. And I'd feel that same weird resentment. He didn't ask. He just did it. He just took control of the situation. It was like he didn't trust me to handle my own problems. I complained to my friends about it in our group chat, told them Jackson was treating me like a damsel in distress. They all agreed. He's undermining your independence, one of them wrote. Total control freak behavior, another one added. Their validation felt so good. It made me feel like I wasn't crazy. My feelings were real. He was being controlling. He was subtly reinforcing the idea that I needed him, that I was incapable. It was insidious. The more I thought about it, the more examples I found. The shelf in the closet that he put up because I couldn't reach the top one. The heavy groceries he always carried in from the car. The way he'd always be the one to deal with the landlord about any issues with the apartment. He was creating a web of dependency around me, all under the guise of being helpful. I started to push back. I insisted on carrying some of the groceries. I struggled, but I did it. I told him I'd call the landlord myself next time something broke. He just looked at me with this unreadable expression and said, "Okay." He didn't fight me on it, which was almost more infuriating. It was like he was just waiting for me to fail. Our social life was completely managed by me. I was the one who made plans with friends, who organized dinners, who suggested things to do on the weekend. If I didn't do it, we'd just sit at home. He seemed perfectly content to watch TV or tinker with something in his little workshop corner of the spare room. I'd drag him out to parties or gallery openings. He'd stand in the corner, holding a drink, looking uncomfortable. He wouldn't mingle. He wouldn't network. He'd talk to the few people he knew, but he never made an effort to meet anyone new. I'd be flitting around the room, making connections, laughing, being the social butterfly. Then I'd look over and see him, just standing there. A human anchor. My friends would ask me, "Is he okay? He seems really bored." And I'd have to make excuses for him. "Oh, he's just shy." Or, "He had a long week at work." It was exhausting. I felt like I was living a life for two people. I was the vibrant, interesting one. He was just there. I told him this once. We were driving home from a friend's party. I'd had a couple of glasses of wine. "You know, it would be nice if you made an effort sometimes," I said. "An effort to do what?" he asked, his eyes on the road. "To talk to people, to be engaged. You just stand there. It makes me look bad. It makes it seem like I have a boring boyfriend." He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I'm not an accessory, Aitana." The nerve of him. I was the one putting in all the work to maintain our image as a cool, functioning couple. And he had the audacity to say that to me. The resentment just grew and grew. It was a constant low-level hum in the background of our relationship. Every time he silently fixed something, every time he paid a bill without mentioning it, every time he just quietly existed in my vibrant world, it added another layer. I started to fantasize about what my life would be like without him. It would be so much lighter, so much freer. I could have my friends over whenever I wanted without worrying about him being a lump on the couch. I could decorate the apartment exactly how I wanted, without his ugly practical things cluttering up the space. I could be me, unfiltered, independent. The idea became more and more appealing. The final straw happened a few months ago. It was late. We were both in bed, reading, or I was reading. He was looking at his phone. Suddenly we heard a loud pop from the kitchen, followed by the sound of spraying water. It was an aggressive hissing sound. I jumped out of bed. "What was that?" Jackson was already up and moving towards the kitchen. I followed him, and my heart sank. Water was gushing from under the sink, flooding the kitchen floor. It was spreading fast. A full-on disaster. I started to panic. Oh my God, what do we do? Call someone. Call the landlord. My voice was high-pitched. I was freaking out. Jackson didn't say anything. He walked calmly through the growing puddle, opened a small utility closet, and pulled out a flashlight and a wrench. He waded back to the sink, got down on his hands and knees in the water, and disappeared under the cabinet. I could hear him grunting, and the sound of metal on metal. After about a minute, the gushing sound of water stopped. It was replaced by a slow, steady drip. He crawled back out, soaking wet. "Okay," he said, breathing a little heavily. I shut off the main valve to the sink. The leak is stopped for now. He stood up and looked around at the lake on our kitchen floor. "We need to clean this up before it warps the floorboards," he said. He was so calm, so in control, and it made me furious. My adrenaline was pumping. I was terrified. And he was just handling it. Like it was nothing. It felt like another performance. Another way to show me how capable he was, and how hysterical I was. "Why didn't you fix this before?" I snapped. He looked at me confused. "What are you talking about? It just broke." "You're the one who's always fiddling with things. You should have known the pipes were old. You should have checked." My voice was getting louder. It was irrational, I know, but I couldn't stop it. I was projecting all my frustration, all my resentment from the past few years onto this one stupid pipe. "Aitana, that's not how it works," he said, his voice still calm, which only enraged me more. "Pipes get old, they burst, it happens." "It happens because you're negligent," I shouted. "You're supposed to be the man of the house, the one who takes care of this stuff, but you let our kitchen flood." He just stared at me. The look on his face was one I had never seen before. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness, it was emptiness, like something inside him had just switched off. He stood there for a moment, water dripping from his clothes onto the already soaked floor. Then I said it, the words that had been bubbling under the surface for months, the words that I thought would finally set me free. "You know what? Don't even bother cleaning this up." I gestured around at the mess, at him, at everything. "I can handle it myself. I am a strong, independent woman. I don't need a man to solve my problems for me." The words hung in the air between us, echoing in the quiet kitchen, punctuated only by the slow drip, drip, drip from under the sink. I expected him to argue. I expected him to apologize. I expected him to get defensive. I expected him to do something. He did nothing. He just stood there, looking at me. His face was a complete blank. He let out a very slow breath. And then he said, with a quiet finality that chilled me to the bone, "You're right." That was it. Just 2 words. He turned around, walked out of the kitchen, his wet footprints trailing behind him on the dry floor of the hallway. I heard him go into the bedroom. I stood there, stunned, in the middle of the flooded kitchen. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to see how strong I was, and realize he needed to step up his game. He was supposed to recognize my power. A few minutes later, he walked back past the kitchen doorway, holding his gym bag and a backpack. They were full. He didn't look at me. He just walked to the front door, put on his shoes, and picked up his keys from the hook. The same hook where my car keys used to hang before he'd take them to fix my problems. The reality of the situation finally started to crash down on me. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He stopped with his hand on the doorknob and finally looked at me. There was no emotion in his eyes, none at all. "I'm respecting your independence," he said, his voice flat. "You said you don't need a man to solve your problems. I believe you." And with that, he opened the door, stepped out, and closed it quietly behind him. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot in the silent apartment. I stood there for a long, long time, alone, in a dark, flooded kitchen. The only sound was the slow, steady dripping from the broken pipe under the sink. Drip, drip, drip. For the first hour, I was in a state of shock. I just stood in the kitchen, staring at the door. My feet were cold from the water. The anger I had felt just moments before was gone, replaced by a hollow, buzzing feeling. He actually left. He heard what I said, and he just left. Part of me couldn't process it. This had to be a dramatic gesture. He was probably just driving around the block to cool off. He'd be back in an hour, maybe two. He'd come in, we'd have a big dramatic fight, and then we'd make up. That's how these things worked. But as the minutes ticked by, and the water on the floor started to feel less like an emergency and more like a permanent fixture of my apartment, a different feeling started to creep in. It was a strange, heady sense of triumph. He left. I did it. I finally stood up for myself. And he couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle a woman who didn't need him. His fragile male ego was so shattered that he had to run away. This wasn't a defeat. It was a victory. I grabbed my phone, my fingers slipping on the screen because my hands were still damp. I opened my group chat with my friends. "You guys will not believe what just happened," I typed. I gave them the short version. The pipe burst. He was being condescending and calm. I told him I was an independent woman, and he walked out. The replies came in almost instantly. "OMG, yes, queen." The trash took itself out. "He couldn't handle your power. Good riddance. So proud of you for finally getting rid of that dead weight." Their validation was like a warm blanket. It chased away the cold, hollow feeling and replaced it with righteous indignation. They were right. I was right. He was the problem, and now the problem was gone. Energized, I decided to tackle the flood. I was an independent woman after all. I could handle a little water. I found all the towels we owned and threw them on the floor. It barely made a dent. The towels were instantly soaked, and the puddle just laughed at me. Okay, new plan. I needed a mop and a bucket. I remembered seeing them in the utility closet. I spent the next 2 hours mopping up the water, wringing out the mop head into the bucket, and dumping the bucket in the bathtub. My back started to ache. My arms felt weak. This was way harder than it looked. By the time the floor was mostly dry, I was exhausted and sweating. I collapsed on the couch, my hair sticking to my forehead. I looked around the apartment. It was so quiet, unnaturally quiet. I had never realized how much space Jackson's presence took up, even when he wasn't talking. There was always a low hum of activity. The sound of him in his workshop, the soft tread of his footsteps, the murmur of the TV on a channel I never watched. Now there was nothing. Just the buzz of the refrigerator and the faint drip from the kitchen. The drip. Right. The water was still shut off. I went into the kitchen to get a glass of water from the tap, out of habit. Nothing happened, of course. The valve was off. I had a few bottles of water in the fridge, so I drank one of those. But I couldn't wash my hands. I couldn't use the dishwasher. The problem wasn't solved. It was just paused. The next morning, I woke up with a stiff neck from sleeping on the couch. I went to take a shower. No water. I went to make coffee. No water. The reality of the situation was starting to sink in. This wasn't just a pause. This was a hard stop. I had to call a plumber. I spent an hour on my phone, searching for emergency plumbing services in my area. Everyone was either booked for the day or charged a ridiculous emergency call-out fee. I finally found one who could come in the afternoon. He quoted me a price that made my stomach clench. It was more than I spent on clothes in a month, but I had no choice. While I waited, I decided to check my email. My laptop wouldn't connect to the internet. The router was blinking again, that stupid mocking little green light. I tried unplugging it and plugging it back in, like I'd seen Jackson do 100 times. Nothing. I tried resetting it. Nothing. I was completely cut off. I had to use the data on my phone, which was already running low for the month. The plumber finally arrived. He was a big, gruff man who looked at the situation under my sink with a sigh. "Yep, that's a burst pipe all right," he said. "Gonna have to replace this whole section. It's old galvanized steel. Should have been replaced with copper years ago." I just nodded, pretending I understood. He spent 3 hours in my kitchen, making loud clanging noises. He left a huge mess. But the water was back on. He handed me the bill. It was even more than he quoted on the phone because he ran into some complications. I paid it with my credit card, feeling a wave of nausea. That was my emergency fund. Gone. But at least it was over. For the next few days, I tried to embrace my new life of freedom. I invited my friends over for a liberation party. They all came, brought wine, and we toasted to my new, man-free existence. We talked about how much better my life was going to be. No more stepping on his dusty work boots. No more sports on TV. No more silence. It felt good. But as they were leaving, one of them asked, "Hey, is your Wi-Fi down? I couldn't connect." I had to admit that it was. Another friend noticed the overflowing garbage can by the door. "Whoa, that's getting pretty full." I forced a laugh and said I'd get to it. After they left, the silence in the apartment felt heavier than ever. The small problems started to pile up. The garbage really did need to be taken out. The bag was heavy and leaking something sticky. I had to carry it down 3 flights of stairs to the dumpster. The internet was still out. I spent 4 hours on a call with the provider, getting transferred from department to department, trying to explain the problem with my blinking green light. They eventually decided to schedule a technician to come out in 10 days. A light bulb burned out in the bathroom ceiling. I stood on a chair trying to reach it, but it was just too high. I had to do my makeup in the dim light of the hallway for a week. My car started making that rattling noise again. This time, it was louder, more insistent. I knew I couldn't ignore it. I took it to the mechanic that Jackson used to go to. The mechanic looked at me over his greasy glasses. "Where's Jackson? He usually brings this thing in." "We're not together anymore," I said, trying to sound casual. He just grunted. An hour later, he called me into the garage. "Your alternator is shot," he said, pointing at something in the engine, "and your brake pads are worn down to nothing. It's not safe to drive. Did you not hear the squealing?" I had heard it. I had just tuned it out. He gave me the estimate. It was a 4-figure number. I almost fainted. I had to leave the car there and take a bus home. The bus was crowded and smelled weird. I sat there, staring out the window at the city, feeling a profound sense of despair. Everything was breaking. Everything was expensive. My life, which had seemed so bright and manageable just a few weeks ago, was suddenly a chaotic mess of unforeseen expenses and logistical nightmares. It was like the whole world was conspiring against me. I got home to a notice taped to my door. It was from the landlord, a reminder that the rent was due. The full rent I had completely forgotten. The portion that Jackson used to pay automatically from his account wasn't going to be there this month. I looked at my bank account on my phone. After the plumber and the car repairs, I didn't have enough. Not even close. The panic that had been simmering under the surface for weeks finally boiled over. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do this alone. My carefully constructed world of independence was a house of cards, and it was collapsing all around me. All those little things that Jackson used to do. They weren't little. They were the pillars holding up my entire life. He wasn't a weight, he was the foundation. He wasn't undermining my independence. He was subsidizing it. He was the invisible infrastructure of my comfort, the fast internet, the functioning car, the paid bills, the quiet competence that solved problems before I even fully registered they were problems. I had taken it all for granted. Worse, I had mocked him for it. I had twisted his quiet capability into a character flaw. I called it toxic masculinity, but it was just competence. He wasn't performing manhood. He was just being a responsible adult. And I had chased him away because his responsibility made me feel insecure. I sank to the floor in my hallway, the eviction notice crinkling in my hand. I thought about his face in the kitchen that night, the emptiness in his eyes. It wasn't that he was angry, it was that he was done. He had been carrying so much for so long without a word of thanks, only to be met with my contempt. And he had finally quietly decided to put it all down. My strength and independence was a luxury he had afforded me. And now the bill was due. I had to talk to him. I had to make him understand that I saw it now. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking. I found his contact. His picture was still there. A selfie we took on a hike last year. He was smiling. I hadn't seen him smile like that in a long time. My finger hovered over the call button. I was terrified. What if he didn't answer? What if he told me to get lost? I had to try. I pressed the button. The phone rang. Once, twice. My heart was pounding in my chest. 3 times. I was about to hang up, convinced he was going to ignore me. Then the ringing stopped, a voice on the other end. "Hello?" It was him. His voice was calm, neutral. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out, just a choked sob. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Aitana?" he asked. "Are you okay?" "No," I whispered, the tears finally starting to fall. I'm not okay. I took a shaky breath. Jackson, I said, my voice cracking, I made a terrible mistake. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear faint noises in the background, the sound of a TV, maybe a distant voice. It sounded like he was in a normal place, a living room. It sounded like his life had just continued. Mine felt like it had derailed completely. What kind of mistake? He finally asked. His voice was still flat, not cold exactly, just detached, like a doctor asking a patient to describe their symptoms. It made me feel even more pathetic. Everything, I cried, the words tumbling out in a rush. The pipe, the internet, my car, it's all broken. And the rent, I can't pay the rent, Jackson. I can't do any of this without you. I was laying it all bare, the humiliating, catastrophic failure of my independence. I waited for him to say, I told you so. I waited for him to gloat, to tell me that I was getting what I deserved. But he didn't. So, you need money? He asked. The question was so practical, so devoid of emotion, that it caught me off guard. It wasn't about us. It wasn't about my grand, tearful realization. He had distilled my entire crisis down to a simple transaction. No, I mean, yes, but that's not the point, I stammered. The point is, I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. I see that now. I told him everything. I told him how I had taken him for granted, how I had mistaken his quiet competence for a personal failing, how I had let my friends' empty slogans poison my view of him. You weren't holding me back, I said, my voice thick with tears. You were holding me up, and I was too blind and too arrogant to see it. I'm so sorry, Jackson. Please, can you just come home? The words hung there, the final desperate plea. Come back to the mess I made. Come back and fix it. Come back and fix me. Another long pause. I could hear him take a deep breath. Tana, he said, and his voice was a little softer now, but still distant. I hear you, and I appreciate the apology. It means something that you can see that now. A flicker of hope ignited in my chest. He appreciated it. It meant something. Maybe this could be fixed. But I'm not coming back, he said. The flicker of hope was extinguished as quickly as it had appeared. What? I whispered. I've moved on, he said simply. I have a new place. My life is calmer now. A new place? The thought had never even occurred to me. In my self-absorbed crisis, I had pictured him sleeping on a friend's couch, waiting for my call. Yeah, he said. I'm sharing a place with Mark. You remember Mark from the gym? The rent is cheap. It's smaller, but it's fine. We're going fishing this weekend. He sounded happy. Not ecstatically happy. Just content. Peaceful. A kind of peace I had probably never allowed him to have in our apartment. But what about us? I asked, my voice small. There is no us anymore, he said, and there was a note of finality in his voice that hadn't been there before. You made that very clear. You said you didn't need a man, and I realized you were right. You don't need a man. You just needed a handyman, a mechanic, a plumber, an IT guy, a co-signer. You needed a function, not a person, and I'm tired of being a function. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, puncturing my ego, my self-pity. He wasn't angry. He was just stating the facts. The truth I had finally seen, he had been living with for years. I'm not going to let you fail, he continued, and my heart leaped again foolishly. I'll transfer you the money for my half of the rent for this month, and I'll send you the number for a good mechanic who won't rip you off. I'll even email you the instructions for how to properly reboot the router, but that's it. It was a severance package, a clean, final severing of all the practical ties that had bound us together. He was giving me the tools to be independent, for real this time. And then he was letting me go. Jackson, please, I begged, all pretense of dignity gone. Don't do this. I love you. The words sounded hollow, even to my own ears. When was the last time I had said that to him and meant it? When was the last time I had done anything to show it? I know you think you do right now, he said, and his voice was laced with a profound sadness. But you don't. You love the idea of what I did for you, and I deserve more than that. I need to be with someone who sees me, not just the things I can fix. I couldn't say anything. What was there to say? He was right. He had summed up the entire ugly truth of our relationship in one sentence. "I have to go, Ayatana," he said. "Mark and I are about to watch the game." Just like that. My world-ending emotional breakdown was an interruption to his Tuesday night TV schedule. "Goodbye," he said softly. And he hung up. I sat there, on the floor, holding the dead phone to my ear. It was over, really, truly over. There would be no rescue, no grand reunion. He wasn't coming back. The next day, the money appeared in my bank account. An email arrived with a PDF attachment, a user manual for my router model with a section on troubleshooting highlighted in yellow. It also contained the name and number of a mechanic. He kept his word. He gave me the tools, and then he was gone. I spent the next few months in a daze. I had to break the lease on the apartment. The penalty fee wiped out the rest of my savings. I sold half my furniture because I couldn't afford a place big enough for it all. I found a tiny studio apartment on the other side of town, in a much less nice neighborhood. It was all I could afford. My friends tried to be supportive at first. They helped me move. They brought me a housewarming plant. But they didn't know what to do with the new me. I wasn't the fun, confident, slogan-spouting Aitana anymore. I was quiet. I was tired. I was poor. When I tried to talk to them about what I had learned, about how wrong I had been, they would get uncomfortable. "Don't be so hard on yourself," they'd say. "He was holding you back anyway." They didn't get it. They couldn't. Their entire worldview was built on the same flimsy foundation as my old one. To admit I was wrong would be to admit that they might be wrong too. So, slowly, they drifted away. The group chat went quiet. The invitations to brunch stopped coming. My life became very small. Work, home, sleep. I learned how to do things. I learned how to budget. I learned how to cook cheap meals instead of ordering takeout. I watched online tutorials and figured out how to fix a running toilet and patch a hole in the wall. I took my car to the mechanic Jackson recommended. He was honest and fair. I learned what an alternator was. I learned how to check my own oil. I learned how to be independent, for real. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't liberating. It was just hard. It was a constant low-level struggle. There was no safety net, no one to call when things went wrong, just me. One day, about a year after he left, I was in the grocery store. I was in the checkout line, calculating in my head whether I could afford to buy the brand-name cereal or if I should stick to the generic one. And then I saw him. He was a few lines over, with a woman. She was pretty, but in a normal, understated way. Not flashy like my friends. She was laughing at something he said. He was smiling. A real, genuine smile. The one I hadn't seen since that hike, years ago. He looked good. He looked relaxed. He looked happy. They had a shopping cart full of groceries. Normal, everyday things. He was putting them on the conveyor belt. She was handing them to him. They were a team. My heart twisted in my chest, a painful, sharp pang of regret and loss. That could have been me. That should have been me. He turned his head slightly, and for a split second, his eyes met mine. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by nothing. Not anger, not pity, just a polite, distant acknowledgement of a familiar face. He gave me a small, tight-lipped nod, and then he turned back to the woman he was with, and he put his arm around her. He didn't look back. I finished paying for my groceries, my hands trembling. I walked home. I sat in my tiny apartment. I had everything I thought I wanted. I had my independence. I had my freedom. I was a strong woman who didn't need a man. And I had never, in my entire life, felt so completely and utterly alone.